So that's the story we want to tell. Myself and a couple of friends got together, and the author of the book, Glenn Justice, and said this needs to be a documentary, and it's timely that we have this documentary so we can look at our history, the ugly, the not so ugly, the true and the untrue, and tell the story. Now that, you'll see in there, one of the interesting things about this is that we decided we want to be factually accurate. It's extremely important that whatever you say has a factual basis. And that's rare in some of the discourse that's going on these days. So we did an archaeological dig. We had professional archaeologists from Sul Ross College and from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We went to the scene of the massacre, and we knew the scene of the massacre because the gentleman in there, Juan Flores, that was an actual interview done in 1997 of Juan Flores by a videographer that never finished his project. So that gentleman talking with the hat, he is a real survivor of the massacre in 1918, and he died in 2002. We happened to get the footage and are using it in our documentary. But we did an archaeological dig at the location that Juan Flores had pointed out when he visited the ruins of Porvenir with the author of the book, Glenn Justice. So we knew where this massacre site was. We did a survey. We had drones, I borrowed a helicopter, we had professional video crews, and we did an analysis of all the expended shell casings and expended bullets that were at the scene. In all these years, the conventional wisdom was that the Rangers were the perpetrators, the Renches. And there's no doubt that the Rangers had some dirty hands, but the ammo that we recovered indicated that the U.S. Army was involved as well, which was particularly surprising because the U.S. Army, with this particular village, was friendly. They had a good relation. The Army would buy supplies there. But the U.S. Army has expended shell casings. And we can tell because, at that time the Rangers were using a certain caliber of weapon and the Army was using another. And the expended shell casings, you could look on the base of the shell and you would see FA. FA stands for Frankfurt Arsenal, was a supplier of U.S. Army ammunition, and only supplied to the U.S. Army. They were 30-06 rounds. Rangers generally were using 30-30s or 30-40 Krags. They're 45 ACP cartridges. That's a military round as opposed to a 45 long Colt. So the Army involvement, to some extent, was clear. And we also know that there was a cover-up attempted thereafter. That both the Rangers and the U.S. Army went into cover-up mode. And it turned out that the Ranger cover-up did not work because the legislature did an investigation. None of the Rangers were ultimately prosecuted, but many of them were fired and the Ranger strength was reduced. There was a state representative from Brownsville named Jose T. Canales, I think it was, anyway, Jose Canales, who was on top of this issue, legislative hearings, and the Rangers didn't come out looking all that good. They were going to film a scene at the Capitol of this investigation when a Texas Ranger named Frank Hammer actually threatened the life of Jose Canales. The reenactment portion was filmed at a ranch south of Marfa, the Cibolo Creek Ranch, owned by John Poindexter, who provided it to us for free, because he wants this story told. He knows the injustice. He's a gentleman like me. He's a Vietnam veteran as I am. And we think the story needs to be told. We're both native Texans, and Texans need to know. The reenactment scene was filmed at the ranch, but the other portion that you saw was at the massacre site. Now, the massacre site's about 40 miles south of Van Horn. It takes about 2.5 hours to drive the 40 miles. You're in the middle of nowhere, and there's no electricity, there's no water, there's nobody there. And you can look across into the abandoned town of Pilares, which is in pretty good shape. It's recently abandoned. We're told it's abandoned because cartels told everybody you got to leave. But that's what we want to do. Now, how does that relate to your quest? Well, I listened to Dr. Gutierrez, and I have to tell you, I agree with a great deal that he said, and we're at different parties, we're probably of different political philosophies, but there's a lot of good things to say there. One of the things he said that I think is really clear, and I would like to fine tune it a little more. This story needs to be known. Not only the story of Porvenir, but the story of your quest for the things that you have wrongfully taken from you. It needs to be known. Two things that need to occur in my view. One of them is the story needs to be known, and there needs to be a win. Somebody needs to win. When you get a win, you get a lot of press. The solution, I believe, will take legislative action to create some kind of method to determine a disbursement method and a disbursement mechanism for whatever monies are available. The state of Texas is not there trying to keep this money from you, to whatever amount it is, however small or however large. They just are confronted with the problem. How do we adjudicate who are the rightful owners and all these heirs and all these claims? I mean, I think they would love for this to go away, but they're not going to be very bold about it. Nobody's going to be bold. Politicians that are bold are rare. Politicians that are bold are afraid to be bold because it always can have political consequences. And to be fair, to some extent, politicians are so covered up with other stuff. There's things like this that are obscure and unknown kind of go to the bottom of the pile, and the bigger issues stay at the top. But I think the legislative process is the way to get something going. And in order to get attention to the issue, you need press and you need a win, at least in my opinion. I would like to say, Dr. Butet has mentioned about all the federal land in the western U.S. That's true, except for Texas. Texas is unique. And I was the commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. We would have annual conventions of commissioners of the other western states. We had a group called Western States Land Commissioner Association. And we are very, very different. Those other western states, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, they have a lot of federal land. In Texas, the surface acreage is about 92 to 95% of all surface acres in Texas are privately owned. And the reason for that is we entered the Union in a manner different than other Western territories. Texas was a republic, it was an independent nation, and we entered not by the federal government annexing a territory, we entered by treaty between two sovereign nations. And part of that treaty said that we shall keep all of our public lands. The state of Texas would keep those public lands. And over the years, the state of Texas gave those public lands away for folks who had served in military service. They gave land to railroad companies to build railroads. They gave land to companies to build the Capitol. They gave all of that away and put it in the private domain. So whereas other states have all this federal land, and it's not all park land, it's federal land, whether it's park or not, but it is federal land. Texas does not, it's privately owned, which actually complicates things substantially. Because whatever real property interest, whether it's surface acreage or whether it's mineral acreage or mineral interest that was wrongfully taken or acquired 150 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever it was, that person that wrongfully took it or acquired, in all probability, probably doesn't own it anymore. It's successors in title that have gone down. So you've got somebody who may own that mineral interest now or that surface acreage, and I know you're only interested in minerals because that's frankly, otherwise it's way too hard. And you're smart that you're interested in those escrow royalty payments. Those are things that are attainable, but the problem now is that adjudicating some of these claims, you've got successors in title. But what your focus, though, as I understand it, is on minerals that are escrowed, mineral revenues that are escrowed. That's the only thing that's possible, to be very honest with you. Now, going back to this, the Porvenir massacre, Juan Flores, he was 12 years old at the time of the massacre. His father was a Longino, his father was killed. There were other, names that we know and their descendants we know, and we've contacted, and the descendants have contacted us. As a matter of fact, we had a descendant, a grandson of one of those killed at the filming of the massacre there. It was a pretty powerful moment, to be honest with you. Those gentlemen, I forgot where I was going on this. We know their names, we know who they are, and then one of the things we're going to do in this documentary is it's a nonprofit endeavor, and that right there, what you saw, cost us about $200,000, and we've got more to do. But we're going to do the documentary in a manner that's called a Veritas documentary. In other words, a lot of documentaries, you have experts sitting in chairs and they're talking to one another and it's filmed. And we'll do some of that. But we're actually going to film the research that we're doing to find out more about what happened. And one of the scenes is going to be me in the Presidio County Courthouse in Marfa researching the land title on that property, because I had initially thought that these that were killed, that the people in Port Veneer were squatters. They weren't. Some of them may have been, but at least 3 of them were pretty significant landowners in Presidio County. They had title to that land. So it will be very telling to go to the courthouse and see who the next person who owned that land after January 28th, 1918. And what makes it now, we may not be popular in certain circles in Presidio County because many of those landowners in 1918 families still own that land. The Bright Ranch, still in the Bright family. Other ranches are still in the ranches. So we're going to find out who got the land after the massacre. Now, the grandson or the great-grandson, are they guilty? No, they're really not. But it'll make the story even more compelling. And we hope to interview the other side, the folks that were the beneficiaries of this violence. And we want to do that because you got to put this in perspective. The violence